Hello, my dears. It's Katie, and I'm here today to talk about some book series that I have DNF'd recently. Now, for those of you who've been here for a while, you're probably like, wait, Katie, you don't DNF books. You're right, I don't DNF books, but series, I have no qualms about DNFing. And I have done that a lot or periodically over my life. It's not something I've done a ton of because when I was a kid, I didn't realize quite what DNFing was. I was just like, this is boring. And then I'd close the book with the bookmark still in it, intending to pick it up at one point or another again, but never going back to it. A perfect example of a book that I did that with, or a series that I did that with, is The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. I got to chapter 16 of Eldest, and I was so bored with it. I could not continue, so I put it down, intending to go back to it. That was when I was about, I had to be 14 maybe, 13, 14, 15-ish range, and I couldn't continue on. So I stopped, and I never continued. I never went back to it. I've since reconsidered picking up that series and continuing on with it, but who knows when I'll actually get to it, but I do think I want to give that one a second try. Another book series I did it with and this one's pretty popular, and that's His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. Loved the first book. Got bored around chapter 6 of The Subtle Knife, but that one I did pick back up. At least I think I did, because I definitely remember things that happened later on in the series. But I also feel like I need to give that one a second try, especially since the show is coming out soon. So oftentimes, even though I've put down a series or DNF'd a series, it doesn't mean it's a forever thing. But these recent series, like in the last year, because there have been a few others that I've stopped reading in the last couple of years, like last year, I think, that I just decided I didn't want to continue. It's not that I didn't like it. I just didn't have the energy to want to pick up that kind of a series. It's a story for another time, because that one or those series are ones that I will potentially continue. It's just a kind of for now thing. I'm just not feeling it. Does that make any sense? I don't know. Probably not. It makes sense to me. But these books, these 3 series that I'm going to talk about today after that long introduction, are ones that I am arguably never going to continue. But as I said earlier, never say never, because there are some that I will pick up down the road at some point, maybe. But we'll see about these 3. Okay, so these series are all ones I actually started this year, some very, very recently, some not. And I do really only have 3 for you, at least at this moment in time, so it shouldn't take too long to explain, but we all know me. I talk forever. So let's just get into this before I ramble on for another 10 years. So the first series that I will not be continuing at this point in my life is the Green Rider series by Kristen Britton. For those of you who've been following me for a while, I read this book back in, I think it was March, and I really, really did not like it. I had a lot of issues with the pacing and the writing. The world building was okay. The characters just felt really flat to me. I just was not digging on the story. But on top of that, it was very, very similar to a story I wrote when I was younger that is very, very near and dear to my heart. And so the fact that this book just did not live up to the pedestal and the expectations that I put it on, I just don't think I can continue on with it. It just didn't grab my attention like I wanted to. It wasn't well written. I just didn't care, and I was so frustrated with everything for like the entire book, and it stayed with me for like weeks, and I just carried that rage around in my body, and I just don't need that. The premise was great, but the execution really didn't work for me, and I just can't see myself wanting to carry on with it. Second is probably going to come as a surprise to some of you guys, and that is the Charlotte Holmes series by Brittany Cavallaro. I read A Study in Charlotte with Kara back in August, and I didn't hate it as much as she did, but I didn't love it, and I was actually kind of on the fence about whether or not it was a series I wanted to continue. And as the weeks went on, I sat back and thought about all of the books that I'd read in August, and that was the one that I realized I'd never thought about again after I finished the book. Like, I closed it, thought about it for like a day, and then never thought about it again. And for me, if I never ever think about a book again after I finished it, that's usually not a good sign. And if it's in a series, I should think about it and, want to be excited to pick up the next book. And you guys know I love Sherlock Holmes, but there was a lot about A Study in Charlotte and just the Charlotte Holmes series that I didn't like. And I talk about it in my 2.5 hour long vlog. It's in there somewhere. But I just didn't like that the way that some things were carried out and explained, and just the gender bentness. Some things really, really, really did not work. And it's frustrating and really, really sad, because it's a world that I love, and when I get a bad adaptation of a world that I love, because there are so many different versions of Holmes, it's unbelievable how many versions there are, and I love a lot of them, but there are a few that I like less, and the Charlotte Holmes series, unfortunately enough, falls into the category of adaptations that I like less. And it's really, really extra disappointing when it's something that you know and love. And I just can't get behind it. And I don't know if I can continue on with it. It's frustrating. There were parts that were enjoyable, but for the most part, I didn't care. And that's really, really bad when you just don't care about anything of characters that you normally know and love. It's just very unfortunate, and I just can't continue on with it, at least at this point. I do know that a few things that happen later, and I have heard that some things get better, but at the same time, I don't know if it's something that I care enough about that I want to continue with at this point. So A Study in Charlotte is just going to go on the back burner / out of my mind for now. And the third and final series that I am DNFing is one that I read very recently, and that is the Invisible Library series by Genevieve Cogman. I read the first book, called The Invisible Library, back in September, and I really did not like it. And I mean, really did not like it. There's a whole list of reasons why I didn't like it, but I'm not turning this into a rant review. It just was another one of those books that had an incredible premise, and I really, really desperately wanted to like it. Like, it had such a good premise, and there were bits and pieces of it that were really well done, especially in the world building category. But I hated the characters so much that I don't care to read, 5 more books about them and counting, because I'm pretty sure the series is still going. But I can't get behind him. So yeah, I just couldn't get behind the characters. Like, the main female protagonist was super annoying and just was portrayed in a really awful, cringy way, even though she is the one telling the story. I didn't care, didn't want to care, and that's all there is to it. The main male protagonist was also super annoying. He had a little bit of an interesting storyline in there at one point, but it lasted about 5 seconds, at least in this book. It is probably going to be expanded on more as the series goes on, but I don't care enough to continue on because he has a possessive, protective nature to kind of unhealthy levels, and I just don't want to read about that. Not interested. And I don't know, the other characters, I don't know, the villain was not interesting. His backstory was boring, dull, and predictable. And, like, I like good villains, but he was not a good villain. And I just can see where it's going a mile away. And I just don't care to find out more. Like, the main female protagonist named Irene, and then the bad guy, who I don't even remember his name, Florian, I don't even know. So the main protagonist, Irene, and then the bad guy, their dynamic reminded me so much of Kylo and Rey, and I can't. I can't. I cannot deal with that. No. And then just the magic was weird. Like, I didn't hate it, but it wasn't explained very well. It just kind of was a thing, and you're like, okay. And I don't know, there was just a lot about it that I didn't like over-sexualization of stuff, just random talk about sex in the middle of nowhere. Like, it just, all of a sudden, we're talking about it. I'm like, there was nothing. There was no reason for this conversation to take place. It's irrelevant. You just probably put it there to appeal to certain types of readers. And I can tell you it's not working. And then there was some lot of descriptions of, like, gore. Like, not explicit gore, but, like, gory enough that it would bother some readers. I tend to not be bothered by it, but, like, at the same time, it really does just all of a sudden pop out of nowhere. So, I mean, if that's something that bothers you and you were interested in this book previously, I'm going to say this is probably not for you, because it shows up more than you think. Just not a good time. I really was not into it at all, and the writing was not great. So, I mean, I have a whole bunch of reasons not to continue with The Invisible Library, but I was really disappointed because the premise is so interesting, and it wants to be so interesting and so well done, but it's not. It could have been incredible, but in my honest opinion, it really, really wasn't. So, not going to continue with that one either. So this ended up turning into a bit of more of a rant session than I was intending it to. But those are the 3 series that I read this year that I will not be continuing, at least, as I said, at this point or at any point in the near future. I just have no interest in continuing with them at this juncture. And as I said, there have been other ones in the last couple of years that I've also decided to DNF, but I haven't really talked about them much because there's no need to. But for those of you who are interested, a really good example is the Fellowship of Fear series. What is it? The Oliver something or other series. I did a whole rant review on the first book, and you guys know I don't do rant reviews very often, but oh man, did that one need a rant. And I went off. Like, prepare yourself if you decide to go watch it. I'll link it up above if you guys are interested, but oh, I had a time with that one. So yeah, as I said, I don't do this very often, but I'm finding that as I nestle myself more and more into the booktube community, and as I'm just kind of reading more these days, because now I do have a tiny little bit more flexibility, I'm just finding that there are what I do and don't like, and I'm doing it a little bit more frequently. I would normally DNF a series like once, maybe twice a year. We're now up to 3, and we still have, 4 months in the year left? So that is a thing that is happening. I don't know if there will be more before the end of the year happens. I will let you know if there are. But for the most part, I don't think that there are going to be. I am toying, and don't at me, I am seriously toying with DNFing just all of Grishaverse, but whatever the next installment of Six of Crows is, because I think I heard it's going to be a trilogy now, I will probably read that, but I don't know if I care enough to read King of Scars. Haven't decided yet. That one is a more likely than not potential that I will DNF the series. I just tend to not get on with Leigh Bardugo. I have only liked 1 out of the 5 books that I've read by her. So we'll see how I feel about that whenever I hear more things from people I trust who've actually read King of Scars. But for now, I'm just going to put that on hold until I get more information. But anyway, those are all of the series that I'm going to talk about for now. As I said, I'll update you if there are any more. And I'd be curious, what are some series that you've DNF'd recently or are seriously considering on DNFing? And what's your kind of policy on it? Do you tend to be able to DNF series, or is it kind of like a once you've started it, you can't stop? I am more likely than not that person, but if I read the first book, I have no issue stopping. So that's where we're at, and I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on this topic, what some series you have DNF'd recently are. But other than that, you guys know the drill. I have all of my social media links down below in the description. I have my Twitter, which is @ASeaOfTomes, which is the same as my handle here. And I also have my Goodreads page, which is also linked down below, where you guys can go follow me and see what I'm reading, track my progress, and see my general superficial thoughts on things before I come and scream at you about them over here. And then I also have my Ships and Fandoms page linked down below for you guys if you are interested. But other than that, I'll catch you later in another video with you guys again soon. Bye!